On to the International Linguistics Olympiad sample puzzle number 3 to introduce you to the world of Linguistics Olympiad puzzles. And now we have Aragonese. And like a lot of these language puzzles, start with a little bit of an introduction about the language, which generally doesn't affect the actual problem. Like I've said, for a lot of these puzzles, it's purely about the pattern, and a lot of them are even abstract away from language at all. Like it's simply like a mathematical puzzle about finding the patterns. But there are some cases where it can be interesting to see what the language is. Maybe it's related to a language you know. Maybe there's something there that can give you a clue. So in this case, we have a Romance language that is similar to Portuguese or Spanish, because this is also spoken around the same area. And there's many other languages. You know, when we look at Romance languages, we tend to focus on the languages that have their own country. So you have like Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese. But there's a bunch of other Romance languages, also descended from Latin, just like those languages, that they don't have their own country, so they're not quite as famous. And possibly one of the most famous of all these is Catalan, spoken in eastern Spain, and there's Galician, spoken in the northwest corner of Spain, and there's a bunch of others. So here, Aragonese is one of these other languages that's generally quite similar to Spanish, Portuguese. It's but you know, it just does things its own way. So you may see many similarities here, but it is its own unique blend. So it's very interesting to look at these Romance languages because they all come back from Latin. And so there was kind of this unified language of the late Roman Empire, this sort of late Latin, that then, as the empire broke up, each of these languages sort of went its own individual direction and had its own evolution. And so they ended up in this whole rainbow of different languages that nonetheless have many similarities. And a lot of this has found its way into English because so much of English comes through French and Latin. So more than half of English words are ultimately from Latin, either directly from Latin or many coming through French, which is itself from Latin. But anyway, I could go on about these languages, but the point here of this puzzle is simply to fill in the blanks. So here we have singulars and plurals, singular and plural form. Bunch of typos up here. It looks like they adapted this from a Portuguese problem and translated to English, but they didn't really do a great job. So it's saying, oh, I could actually read a bit of the Portuguese saying, well, following some words in Aragonese with their translations to Portuguese and their plural forms. Well, yeah, here instead it's now to English. So they adapted this problem to English. Okay. But now we get to the core of the puzzle, which is nothing but looking at these words. Okay, so we just want to look at zoom in here. All right, so this is all about finding the pattern. So we see each line is one word. In the middle column, we get the singular form, and then we have the plural form. Now, we're very familiar with this because we do this in English as well, putting an S or Z very commonly at the end. Of course, we write it with the S usually, but the pronunciation is often a Z. We have like cats and dogs, so we do have this S and Z in the plural. And this is something that you can see Romance languages also do with the S. So here we have bal becomes bals. Okay, so that gets an S. Banquet becomes banquets, that's a Z. T or Z. T, there's also T. Okay, so we're looking for any pattern here that, because we need to find, well, what is the choice? Like, when do you get S, when do you get Z? Well, here we see a T and a Z, another T and a Z. Here's an L with an S, another L with an S. So that seems like a straightforward pattern. Here we have a U, the O, de shows that here we have vowels here, and that gets an S. And here another vowel, E here, that gets an S. And here we see an X, and that gets an ES. Okay, both gets 2 letters added here. So now when we get to this, these mystery forms, we simply pick the existing word that we know that is as close as possible to the mystery word. So here, concordao, well, that is ending with vowels. And here, actually, it's ending with AU, exactly like deschao. So it certainly would be the best guess that we, based on this information, we have to imagine that it's concordao with an S at the end for this one. Here we see chocolat with a T, and we see the words ending with T have a Z after them. So that's got to be chocolat with a Z. Chunta, this is a vowel. Now we don't see any other words that end in a. So I guess a little bit of linguistics is coming into this one, because you have to kind of see that, well, as a vowel. So yes, we don't know exactly what this language likes to do after an A, but we see what it does after an AU, you get an S. After an E, you also get an S. So it seems like for any vowel, it would be okay to put an S. And certainly that's the closest thing that we're seeing. The closest versions, the words that are closest to chunta are words that end in a vowel, and they get the S. Okay, so that's got to get the S at the end. Here you see eclix, you get the X, and we see an example of a word ending in X, which is fish. That gets the ES. So we have to imagine that this gets eclixes. I'm sure it's not pronounced that way, but eclixes gets the X with the ES ending. And finally, the fairfet, we have the Z, just like everything that ends in a T. So this is about as straightforward as a Linguistics Olympiad puzzle can get. That's enough to resolve the pattern. I mean, it almost seems too easy. You could look to see, well, are you missing something? Is there another possible pattern? The choice of which plural, does it have something to do with the meaning of the word? So it's possible to get lost looking at other patterns. You could see, is there something about the meaning? Like, okay, stool and hole get Z, but valley and stone get S. Trying to find some pattern in the meanings. Not seeing patterns in the meanings there. The length of the word, maybe you have clot and bal are both very short. One gets S, one gets Z. I'm just not seeing any other patterns. The word, the letter it starts with, well, you could start with a B, you get S or Z. Here you start with a C, you get Z or S. So I don't see any other patterns here that could explain the choice of plural. So I have to go with the simplest straightforward answer, S, Z, S, ES, and Z. And that is, well, it's kind of like a miniature version of one of these Olympiad puzzles, because there it is. But it's all about identifying the pattern. You fill in the blanks. That's all there is to it.